everyone, Sam Shaw here, founder of Wall Street Mastermind. I'm excited to be back today with another client interview for you guys. And today I'm really excited to have Amanda on with us. And Amanda is one of our students that we actually only started working with not too long ago, but she's already finished with the recruiting process. And just honestly, I think you absolutely crushed it in a very short amount of time, which is I think a testament to all the work that you put in. But I'm excited to get her to come on here and just kind of talk about her experience. And I think like a lot of you will be able to kind of relate to kind of where she came from and, what she had to go through to get to this point. And so hopefully, we'll be able to share some insights with you along the way that's going to help you with your own process as well. So with that said, Amanda, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to be here with us today, especially during finals week and while you're studying abroad in Spain. And I'm sure you have a lot of stuff going on right now. So thank you for being here. And I guess to start off, if you can just briefly introduce yourself and kind of just let our followers know who you are. And then, I'm probably going to ask you some questions and we can kind of take it from there.
Okay, yeah, thank you for having me. Sounds good. So my name is Amanda. I'm a junior at Tulane University in the Freeman School of Business. I'm a finance major with an accounting minor, and I'm originally from Barrington, Rhode Island. Right now I'm actually studying abroad, like you said, in Madrid, Spain. So it's been a little difficult with the investment banking process because of the time difference, but not too bad, definitely manageable. So I guess where I kind of started with the investment banking process was in the second semester of my sophomore year. And then I joined Wall Street Mastermind only a few months ago, like you said, in I think September.
Yep.
So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're sitting here in mid-December. I think you joined in September, basically at the start of your junior year, right? And so I guess like before we kind of dive into kind of like your experience in Wall Street Mastermind, things like that, what people are always wondering about when we do these interviews, first off, is like they want to know like where are you going to be going for your junior summer internship?
Right. So I just accepted an offer at Deutsche Bank for the summer of 2023 and in their investment bank, but doing fixed income, commodities, and currencies trading and sales.
Awesome. Okay, so you're going to their sales and trading team basically.
Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. And so let's go back to kind of the beginning because you said that you started recruiting second semester sophomore year, and that's kind of like when all the applications start opening up nowadays, right? Like very, very early, probably like halfway through sophomore year, I would say. And so obviously that was like that started happening prior to you joining Wall Street Mastermind, because to your point, you didn't join until September junior year. So can we first talk about maybe that second half of sophomore year, or maybe even prior to that? I don't know when you started preparing, but like prior to joining Wall Street Mastermind, what were some of the things that you were kind of already doing on your own? Like what were some of the resources that you were using? And obviously going to Tulane, like you guys aren't really a target school, right? And so like what kind of resources did you have available at your disposal, and like how are you going about it, I guess?
Right. So I probably should have mentioned this before when I was going over my background, but I had already had an internship that fall at a private equity firm. So that was kind of like my starting point, and actually the reason why I wanted to get involved in some form of investment banking. So that's what kind of drove me to apply to an internship, which I got in the spring of my sophomore year, which was also just at a wealth management firm. So it's just kind of trying to build my resume experience that was like relevant to anything in finance.
Right.
And then ultimately made me apply to an internship in cryptocurrency over the summer. So I was kind of like building this resume that was relevant to finance, but obviously not like investment banking particularly. And while that was happening, I was working with the Career Center at Tulane. That was kind of my main resource. And aside from that, I didn't really have any like guidance or anything besides like my bosses or coworkers at these internships that I had been doing. So it was kind of on me in the Career Center at Tulane wasn't really geared specifically toward investment banking. So like they weren't that much help either. So it's kind of on me to like seek out advice from other people. Like, so networking was actually like very helpful for me. Like trying to get on calls with people and just like actually listening to their advice on what I can do, because I didn't really have that many resources. And also that's how I learned about Wall Street Mastermind, is through your podcast. Like I would listen to that in the mornings. So that was super helpful for me. But I think, yeah, I guess this is probably one of your next questions coming up, but just my biggest challenge was not being a part of a target school, like not being kind of built for the investment banking process, like not knowing when to start, not knowing if I was doing enough. And like specifically with networking, like I was doing it all wrong, or just not the most productive way possible. And so I think that is one of the things that has really helped me with just the modules and like being a part of Wall Street Management.
Gotcha. Okay. That's funny. So you found us through the podcast, and now you're going to be on the podcast, so it's all come full circle.
Yes.
And someone else will be listening to this episode, and then eventually they'll be in Wall Street Mastermind. So that's pretty cool. But so obviously there's a lot to unpack there. But it sounds like primarily because you go to a non-target school, you don't have the luxury of maybe say someone who goes to like a Wharton or a Columbia, where everybody around them is also trying to get into investment banking, and there's all these clubs you can join that helps you get into investment banking, and there's upperclassmen, there's alumni, like, you know, that you can easily reach out to. Like you basically didn't really have most, if any, of those things, right? And so you talk about the career center. I think that's like probably the first logical place that anyone would go to for help with recruiting. But you also said that like it wasn't very geared towards investment banking. So can you, because I think like people have this question a lot, and we do run into this when we talk to different students. Like what is it that the career center was, or maybe was not doing, that made you feel like, hey, like the help that I'm getting here is not sufficient? Or like because obviously, like, you know, and a related question to that would be like, so I know you found us through the podcast, it sounds like, but like what made you want to go out on your own and get even more help than what you already had through the career center at school? Because obviously if that was like, if you felt like that was already giving you everything you needed, then you wouldn't have done that, right? So like, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, of course. Well, the Career Center at Tulane is great. Like the advisors are so nice, and like they're more than willing to make time off of their schedule to meet with you and stuff. So their flexibility was really awesome. It was just for me, like their lack of actual knowledge about like what I wanted to do or like how to get there. Like I think the recruitment process, especially after talking to bankers, at like big banks and stuff, I guess like the recruitment process has changed so much. And I think at least the career advisors at Tulane like haven't really kept up to date with that. And like I think that was that getting that information and like perspective from Wall Street Mastermind was very like pivotal for me, especially like even just from your podcast, like knowing that, okay, I was in the spring of my sophomore year starting the recruitment process, but like didn't have any knowledge on like what I should be preparing for. Like I was honestly like a little late to the game. And then I think what made me like actually commit to the program and Wall Street Mastermind was like when it was the fall of my junior year, and like that is kind of honestly approaching the end of the recruiting season. And I was like, okay, I know I want to do this, and like this area is where I want to start. I want to be at one of these banks. Like, what do I need to do to get there? And like, I don't think the career advisors were like as on top of it. It wasn't their main priority because they're dealing with like hundreds of students. And I feel like being at Wall Street Mastermind, like you get a response within like 24 hours. You have all these open channels that you can message at any time. And also just being on Spain time now and not USA time, like I needed that 24-hour service and guidance. So for me, that's kind of the biggest difference between the advisors and the program.
Got it. So that makes sense. So basically, to summarize what you said, obviously your career advisor at school, they're gonna do their best to help you, but I think at the end of the day, it sounds like, and this is not just for your school, but pretty much with any school, you can almost guarantee that whoever is the career advisor at your school probably didn't come from an investment banking background, because that's just not something that investment bankers will leave their jobs to go and do, right? So that's the first thing, is having that like domain expertise when it comes to like investment banking recruiting specifically, versus just kind of like general overall recruiting for any kind of industry. So that's one. But then two, I guess, no matter what, like the level of attention, even if they try to be flexible with their scheduling and they try to meet with you anytime you want, like at the end of the day, the difference between a career advisor who has to help hundreds or maybe even more students, I don't know how many students you guys had at Tulane, versus in Wall Street Mastermind, if you have, I mean, we create private channels for every student, and for those who are not in the program don't know, like inside your private channel, there's myself, and then there's like at least two other coaches in there who are, all answering your questions around the clock, and that's kind of like our way of making sure that there's always someone that's available to be responsive to your needs, right? So just like the ratio is just different. It's like having one advisor serving hundreds or maybe thousands of students versus having, at least three coaches assigned to every single student that we work with, right? And so that makes a lot of sense. I guess when you were joining Wall Street Mastermind initially, like, did you obviously spoke to our team? You probably also spoke to like someone who went through our program already, because that's our typical process. Is like, you'll speak to an alum first, and then if after that you still are interested, then you'll speak to someone on our actual team to see if it's a good fit. But like, as you were going through that process, like, you probably asked a lot of questions, but did you have any concerns or like skepticism about like, hey, like, obviously you've been listening to our podcast for a while, so that probably helped, but like, were you worried at all, like, what if you join this program and it doesn't work? Or like, because also ultimately obviously you still joined, but like, did you have to overcome anything like that along the way, or was this like a very easy decision for you?
It was definitely on the easier side because I knew like what I was doing with the recruiting process was not cutting it. Like I wasn't getting responses back from networking, and I wasn't getting any offers or interviews or anything. So I knew that I like had to do something differently. I think the main kind of obstacle was definitely like it was expensive, but we did like a money back guaranteed option. And so that is kind of what convinced my parents and sold me as well. And I wasn't really that skeptical that it wouldn't work. Like I definitely thought, okay, if they can offer this, then they're definitely going to get you an offer somewhere. Like that wouldn't just be kind of like an option that you can have. And so I was a little confident that like I could get an offer somewhere. I just didn't know if that was going to be sort of like a smaller boutique or like regional bank, or like if that meant sort of bigger in a location that I wanted. So I don't know. I wasn't as skeptical that I wasn't going to get an offer. I just didn't know if it was worth it for like how much you'd be paying. But in the end, I definitely think it was. I think I remember in one of the early modules, or like on the podcast, you said like, okay, it's this much money for this job, and then like over the course of your lifetime think about like how much you're going to be compounding that with what you're going to be making. Like it's honestly such a small percentage of like what your goal is, and that's kind of what changed my perspective and sold me on it.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, and yeah, that's right. The fact that there is a money back guarantee, I think, pretty much removes all the risk, right? The only risk is like if you don't do the work, but because like obviously for our money back guarantee, the only stipulation is like you got to do the work, right? But like the guarantee is that, hey, if we tell you that we think you're good enough to get an outcome with this program and we invite you in, then as long as you hold up your end of the bargain and you do the work, then we're willing to guarantee the results, right? And so I think that's not a normal thing. I would say, like, I don't think any, I don't know if you checked out any other programs or, our competitors and stuff like that. Like, I haven't seen any other companies offer something like that. Right. And so, but, and to your point too, though, like, since it was September of junior year already, it was late in the process. And so, like a lot of the bigger firms were already done recruiting for summer 2023 at that point, right? And so to your point, like there were also fewer options, at least like if you're talking about like the really big firms, there were fewer options for us to go after at that point. And so it wasn't like, I wouldn't say this was like an easy thing like by any means, right, to accomplish. And so like did I hear you correctly? Did you say like prior to joining the program, I mean, like it was easy for you to join the program because you knew that what you were doing on your own wasn't really working, so you hadn't had any other interviews prior to joining our program, is that right?
No, so actually, I before joining the program, I was so lost. I was just applying to like pretty much any position um at like big banks, kind of like investment bank or commercial banking or like wealth management, like literally anything, even though I knew I wanted to do investment banking just in case. I didn't like realize that probably wasn't the best approach, but so I had one internship or one interview for the JP Morgan commercial banking internship, and like I got that because there's a program like Women Investing in Women. It's one of their diversity programs, and so I got accepted to that, which pushed me to the super day of the commercial banking one, which I was not prepared for at all. I barely even prepared for the interview. Like I worked through like my behaviorals a lot, but I wasn't sure what they were going to be asking for technical questions. I didn't even know that that was kind of a part of the interview process. Like that's how unprepared I was. And so I think that also is kind of what drove me to be like, okay, I definitely need to change my approach. And like, I wasn't prepared for this at all.
Mm.
But I'm also grateful that that happened because I don't want to work in commercial banking. So if I did get that internship, like I would have kind of been stuck there. So I don't really know why I did that, but I
Yeah,
guess it all worked out in the end.
yeah. So it sounds like actually like, I mean, you were just a little bit lost, like you kind of were just almost like applying to anything you could find that's even remotely considered finance. But in reality, now in hindsight, you, based on where you are now, you actually know like there's a big difference between all of those different things that you were applying to. And when I say big difference, obviously like the job itself is different, but compensation is different, the exit opportunities are different, the type of the roles and responsibilities are different, like everything is just different, right? um but I think that's also like, and I don't think that's really your fault. I think that's actually like a very common thing that we see with a lot of people that go to a non-target school, where there's just nobody around you that can actually like guide you with these things, or like explain to you the differences between this division versus that division, or like which one might be a better fit for you. And so you're kind of just like left to go and figure out all these things on your own, and that can be very overwhelming, right? Like that's probably what happened, right? And so I think like my advice for people who, especially people who go to non-target schools, is that unfortunately they don't really teach you this stuff in school, and they really should. I don't know why they don't, but they just don't. And so it's almost like it's on you to go out and like find an environment that you can kind of put yourself in and surround yourself with the right people and other like-minded students who are also trying to do the same things as you, and coaches and mentors who are willing to actually like help you navigate through this process so that you don't make the silly mistakes, right? And not even for lack of effort, because it sounds like you were doing a lot. We're trying to do a lot on your own and applying to all these places, but just like, I think working really, really hard, but going down the wrong path or in the wrong direction is almost worse than like not working that hard at all, because you're just like, it's all this wasted effort, right? Um,
Mhm.
and so I guess you go from that, where you're applying to a bunch of stuff, you got one super day, didn't really work out because you didn't even know what to expect on interviews, you didn't study for the technicals. You joined Wall Street Mastermind, and then that was back in September, right? This Deutsche offer that you ended up getting getting the offer for, was this your first interview after joining the program, or kind of like walk us through, I guess walk us through like kind of what you did then after you joined, and like how did things change for you? Because this is also the other question that a lot of people ask. It's like, well, I mean, what are you guys doing in the program that's so different than what I would be doing on my own? Like, what, why would I choose to do something like that, like this, versus to just keep doing whatever it is that I've already been doing? Can you kind of walk us through the kind of like the before and after, I guess?
Yeah. I guess I'll preface it with just I'm someone who does very well with like structured time. And so that was the biggest change for me was that I felt like my recruiting process prior to Wall Street Mastermind was very unstructured. I was doing a million things at once and wasn't really doing any of them at 100%. I was like briefly looking at behavioral questions and practicing that and like putting all my energy into networking. But anyway, so that was the biggest change and just like go having like, okay, this is where I need to be doing on a weekly basis. Like this is where I need to be doing on a daily basis. And how can I manage this while also like enjoying my time abroad? But also like making deadlines for like this is when these applications will be due. And so and like also having people to ask questions to at any time. And so I think the most helpful strategy that I learned from Wall Street Mastermind is I don't want to like give away your secrets, but I think like time blocking was very helpful for me. And I honestly use that even after the recruiting process every day. Like I did fall behind with I think like some of the modules and that was kind of challenging because once that interview did come around for Deutsche Bank, I was definitely a little unprepared. Not unprepared, but just behind on the modules for like technical questions. But that's so easy to just go through. And I mean, you have a whole entire section that's like at your disposal. So catching up for that isn't really that big of a deal. But just, yeah, sorry, I'm like jumping all over the place. But going back to time blocking, like being able to carve out specific times in your day for like, okay, this is my class schedule. I could wake up at 8 a.m. and do 3 hours of networking and just interview prep then or like I could do it after class and then hang out with my friends at this time. And I know I'm leaving Friday to go here, so I need to get all of this done before Friday. And just being able to like make a schedule for yourself so you're getting things done before the timelines. I think that was definitely the biggest change for me when I started Wall Street Mastermind. And then also just how you go about doing different things. Like there's such a technique to networking and to how your resume should look and how you can review for technical questions, but like simplify it for yourself and still sound very educated. And so the combination of all those things, it was so much more structured than what I was doing before and so much simpler. And I just never would have expected that.
Mm.
Um, so I think that's kind of the biggest change from what I was doing before.
And I think honestly, like that's sounds so simple, but it's so important, right? It's like recruiting is a very chaotic process where there's just so much that's being asked of you as a candidate. You know, you're trying to keep your grades up in school as a full-time student, in your case also studying abroad and trying to get that experience, and then you're trying to build up your resume with relevant internships, you're trying to network with all these bankers, you got to like polish your behavioral stories, prep for your technicals. There's just a lot of stuff that you have to do, right? And like if you don't have like a organized and methodical way of doing those things, and then also not just that, but like there is like an order of operations where a lot of these things actually build on each other and there's dependencies on each other, and if you do them in the wrong order, you might still be able to get it done. Sometimes yes, sometimes no, but even if you do get the thing done, like it's going to end up taking you a lot longer just because you did it like the harder way. Right? Like the example I'll give is like if your resume sucks and you go out and you try to network, like you're probably not going to be getting a whole lot of responses, and you're going to be sitting there wondering, like a lot of times people sit there and wonder, like, why am I not getting responses? Am I like sending the wrong email? And the whole time it's like, no, nothing's wrong with your email, but your resume is super ugly and your LinkedIn profile is not optimized. And when you send an email to these bankers, they look you up and they're like, I don't think I want to talk to this person. Right. And then so you're just like, but like without someone telling you that, this is just one of many examples, but without someone pointing that out to you, like you don't even know that that's the thing that's keeping you stuck. Right. And then that's where you start spinning your wheels and whatever. And so we could give so many other examples of that, but like if you just repeat that like multiple times throughout the recruiting process, and every single time slows you down a little bit and slows you down a little bit and slows you down a little bit, like the margin for error is so low with something as selective as investment banking that any one of these things can be the thing that prevents you from getting to the outcome that you want, right? And that's also the funny thing, is that like sometimes I feel like for some students, like you're actually not that far away from where you're trying to go. Like you might be 3 feet away from gold, but it's just like there's like 1 or 2 small tweaks that you need to make to overcome the obstacle that's in front of you. But sometimes it's those like these small tiny tweaks are like the least obvious things, right? Like if they're really, really obvious, then you would have already done it. And so like if you can't identify what those issues are on your own, then you need someone else who's trained in identifying these things to come in, or has the experience to come in and tell you those things. And like once someone tells you about it, then like a lot of times fixing the issue is actually not that hard once you know what you need to fix, right? And so I think like structure, like you mentioned structure, you use that word a lot. Like I think that's really important, but also like you said like made it so much simpler. I think like that's a good way of putting it, because no matter what, like I think it's fair to say that investment banking recruiting is never easy. Like I'm not sitting here and saying, hey, if you work with Wall Street Mastermind, then investment banking recruiting is going to be easy. It's never easy, but like you can make it simple. You can make it simple as in like you can remove all the trial and error. You can not have to like second guess yourself and wonder like, am I doing this the right way? And if it's something's not working, like you don't have to wonder like, why is this not working, and like not being able to figure it out. You can simplify all that by just saying like, hey, I know exactly what I need to do, how to do it, what orders to do it in, and here's when I'm going to do all those things, time block everything out, and just like be super organized about it, right? And then like for you specifically too, because it was already getting late, like it was already junior year by the time you joined, I'm sure you had like just a lot of like urgency, in terms of like a sense of urgency in terms of like, hey, how can I get this done in like an efficient and timely manner, right? Because the longer this dragged on, like the fewer good options that were going to be left, right? So can you talk a little bit about then like how you ended up getting this interview with Deutsche then? And like I guess I asked this earlier, but then I kind of got sidetracked. Like was this kind of like your first interview after joining the program, or did you also have other interviews prior to this, or how did this all come about?
Yeah, this was my first interview after joining the program. And basically when I got so I applied to their fixed income internship specifically. That's like kind of what I was most interested in, especially after the semester and like taking a few courses in that area. But so as soon as I heard back, I was super excited. And I was trying to network with them because I had an outgoing application anyway. So I talked to a few bankers like in their investment bank, but not specifically on the team. So then as soon as I got in, I started kind of targeting my searches for networking, like towards their debt teams and like leverage finance teams specifically. And that kind of connected me. There was actually a Tulane alumni there. And so he was really great. And like we kind of connected over that. He also studied abroad. So in Madrid, actually. So we had like a lot to talk about. And then he was really like a helpful mentor with just going through like their interview process and what it typically looked like and like what I should prepare for, which was pretty much everything that I already had been doing. So I felt pretty confident there. So then I had that first round interview, and then a week later, the second round, and then I heard back only like 3 days after. So that was kind of the whole process of that.
Okay, so it happened super quick. Like once you network with the right person and you got the interview, everything happened. Like, I mean, I guess it was 2 rounds of interview and all happened within like a week then, right?
Yeah, with a week and a half, 2 weeks. He actually connected me with two other people on his team too, so that was super helpful. One of them, like neither of them went to Tulane. One of them was on the recruitment team though, so I think that definitely worked in my favor. And he was really great with just advice on how to be prepared. So I think if you can, my advice to you, try to get in touch with someone on that team, because on the recruitment team, they're actually very helpful with
Yeah.
preparing for interviews.
Was there a difference in how you ended up networking your way into this like super helpful relationship versus because you were already networking prior to Wall Street Mastermind, right? Was there a difference in how you networked this time to land this referral from this person versus how you were doing it before?
Yeah, 100%. It was completely different approach over the summer when I was networking. I think I was like reaching out on LinkedIn and just it's so cringe. I was looking back at some of my like outgoing messages, and there's like typos, and it's just embarrassing, honestly. And then going from that to kind of the Wall Street Mastermind way, where I'm like proofreading everything, kind of personalizing it, trying to make it relatable to the person I'm sending it to. So it was a combination of all of those things. And then even just how I found him, like making your searches geared towards like the specific team or specific internship that you're applying to is it's so much more helpful for both sides, and it saves both sides so much more time. Over the summer, I was kind of just looking at Tulane alumni that works at the banks I was applying to and reaching out to them regardless of whether or not they were on the team of the internship that I was applying to.
No.
And it was just kind of um, relevant for both of us. So I think just making sure you're like gearing your searches towards what you actually want to do saves both parties a lot of time.
That makes sense. Okay. And then what about like the interview prep side? Because then, so like for example, this alum told you kind of like what to expect in the interviews and what are the things you need to prep for, and then you said like they happen to be kind of like all the things that you were already doing anyway. And so like, how are you going about the interview prep side of things? And same question here, I guess. Like, did the way you approach interview prep change at all from what you were doing prior to Wall Street Mastermind?
Yeah, definitely. I think what most people start out doing is just looking up like top 10 questions asked in investment banking interviews. And most of the time, like they're actually pretty accurate. Like, walk me through your resume, tell me about yourself, stuff like that. But I think the main difference was just having kind of a template of what you should try to say and like things that you should leave out and things that you should keep in. That having that at Wall Street Mastermind was really beneficial for me because my answers were started off way too brief. And honestly, again, kind of embarrassing. Like, I didn't even know what was on my resume when I was doing this over the summer. Like, I don't even think I could answer the question, like, walk me through your resume, because there's so much, and like it was difficult for me to condense everything. So just changing that kind of, yeah, just changing that preparation and making sure that like you can answer the questions in the most like efficient and educated way, I guess, was the biggest change. And then also the technical questions, like again, how I was doing that over the summer was just looking up like top 10 technical questions they ask on investment banking interviews and reviewing like answers to that. But like even with my history in business and like taking business classes, it was still kind of difficult for me to understand and articulate answers to those questions. And so having again a template at Wall Street Mastermind was really beneficial for me, especially in the technical questions area.
Gotcha. I mean, so on the behavioral side, like I feel like the toughest part for most people is, well, actually, a lot of people don't feel like the behavioral part is tough. And I think a lot of people will usually say, like, oh, yeah, like behavioral questions, that's easy. I can do that. I know how to talk about myself. But I think like what most people don't realize is that a lot of times with the behavioral part, the hard part is not like figuring out what you want to say, but the hard part is figuring out, are the answers that you prepared actually better than what your competition has prepared and what they're going to say, right? And because of the behavioral answers, it's like not a right or wrong answer, but you're actually being graded on a curve relative to your competition. And most people just don't know. Like most people just, and if you ask 10 people how they feel about their behavioral answers, like I think most people say, oh yeah, I feel pretty good about it. Problem is like not everyone can be like the person that gets the offer, right? And so I think like that's where having someone else give you feedback on your answers, and not just like anybody, but like having someone who's actually seen hundreds of different people and how they answer these questions. That way they can like actually help you benchmark your answers against other people's answers. And like if you have certain answers that are falling short or not where it needs to be, then they can give you that feedback and tell you not only that, but tell you like, here's how you need to change it. Right. Cause also like it's not it's not like realistic to ask yourself to come up with how you should be changing your answers because you're the one that came up with the answers in the first place, right? And so I think that's like the part on the behavioral side that is most people are missing, and this is like, hey, if you really want to do this the right way, you can't just only be focused on your answers. You also have to focus on what other people are doing, right? On a technical side, I actually was going to ask you like, because your interview was for like fixed income sales and trading, right? And so like, how applicable did you find the technical training that we had in the program to be for what you were interviewing for? Like, was it still pretty much like all the same things that they were asking, or like how applicable was it for you?
Yeah, I knew they wouldn't ask me questions like pitch me a stock or something like that, but I think just having a basic knowledge, regardless of like what area of finance you're interviewing for, like just having a basic knowledge of how the how the income statement like flows to the cash flow and how that flows to the balance sheet, like financial statements and just like valuation methods, all of that stuff. It's good to just know that stuff anyway, because it kind of is able to give you just like a leg up on your competition if you could throw in some of that in your answers. But basically, when I was interviewing, the only really technical question they asked me was like kind of walk me through the markets and like how has the supply chain been affected, like how has the bond market been affected by like the pandemic and stuff like that, or inflation rates. And that was all kind of not that was not very difficult for me because when I started at Wall Street Mastermind, like one of like the things that they said to do is try to keep up with the markets or something like that. So I was like already listening to podcasts and like the news pretty much every day. So it's pretty hard to avoid like those big headlines that are coming out about inflation and how it's affecting like bonds and the yield curve, etc. But I think, yeah, just a lot of it wasn't that applicable to my interviews. They didn't ask me very technical questions, but I'm happy that I did that module because even going forward, just like being a business student, that stuff is like really helpful and very important. And you kind of forget about it after freshman year and like going forward for your future career anyway. It's just good to have that basic knowledge of how that stuff works in very simple terms.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's basically, it sounds like there's still obviously it's slightly different from like a more traditional investment banking interview, but there's still a lot of overlap in terms of just the fundamental kind of like foundational technical knowledge that you need to understand in terms of like three statements, valuation, things like that. And then on top of that, the question is gonna be a lot more markets based because it is a sales and trading rule. So making sure that you're up to date on what's going on in the markets, up to date with inflation, what the Fed is doing, et cetera, like, and being able to speak to that intelligently and be well versed in that, that's kind of probably like one of the most important things, specifically as far as like sales and trading rules go. Would you say that's correct? Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also think you should just know that stuff like regardless because it will help you in your business classes and I think in any interview, like regardless of your position, if it's at a bank or something, they're probably going to ask that question. So you should probably always just like be prepared and have something to say for that.
For sure. That makes sense. Um, I guess last question for you, like now that you're on the other side, um, and by the way, like I would say, um, coming in September junior year and then like ending up still at like a bulge bracket bank, I think that's like phenomenal outcome. So like super happy for you. But now that you're on the other side, and obviously it's been a pretty long journey for you, I'm sure you feel that way. Um, do you have any advice for people who are just about to start this process, or maybe who are currently still going through the process? Like anything in hindsight that um, maybe it's a piece of advice that someone gave you that helped you tremendously, that you kind of want to pass on to other people that will help make their lives easier.
Mhm. I think if you know this is definitely what you want to do, um, I would just say like put 100% into it. It's a lot of work, and sometimes it can be very anxiety inducing when you're not hearing back and it's getting later in the process. But I think in most cases it does work out. You don't have to be like constantly thinking about like being at the big bank. Just like know that there's going to be somewhere that will take you, and if you're putting 100% into like your networking and all aspects of your interviews, um, like you're gonna get results from that. And I think be willing to ask questions too, and having kind of a backbone of support. For me, that was Wall Street Mastermind. Like that was so crucial, and like it gave me so much more confidence and kind of like a passion to do this. And so I think just finding like your sources of motivation as well, because it is very time consuming, and just knowing that like you have people there in your corner and you will get results if you put in hard work.
Absolutely. I think that's really good advice, which is like, I think for anyone who wants to be successful in recruiting, um, persistence and resilience, like those are some really important qualities that you just have to have. Um,
Mhm.
because a lot of times, like, you're not going to get an offer right away, or for most people, you're going to have to go through multiple rejections before you eventually end up getting like that offer that you were looking for, right? So sometimes, like you're like I said earlier, you might be really close, but if you give up, then you'll never realize how close you were, right? But I think the other thing that you said is that's really important too, or just as important, is like being persistent and giving it 100% effort. Like that's obviously just table stakes, that's mandatory. But like if you're putting a lot of effort, you're giving it everything you got, but you're doing the wrong things, or you're doing it in the wrong order, or using the wrong approach, then that still doesn't guarantee that you're going to get the results that you want, right? And so you want to make sure that yes, you have someone or somewhere that you can go and ask questions when you have questions, because you will have questions. You're gonna have a lot of questions along the way. Um, and so like finding that support network, finding that the people who are actually both qualified to help you, but also like actually willing to spend the time. Because a lot of people, unfortunately, who are qualified to help are super busy and not really like it's not really their job to help you get a job, right? And so like being able to find that like that person or that group of people who are both capable and willing to help, I think like that's going to be really important, right? And so if you guys already, for those of you that are like still with us, like if you already have something like that, that's absolutely great. You should definitely like do everything you can to leverage that as much as possible. If you don't already have that, or maybe you go to a non-target school and you don't have a lot of resources available, to you, and you're just not in that type of environment where there's a lot of like-minded peers around you who are also going through the same challenges and can understand what you're going through and give you advice and things like that, and you're looking for the extra bit of help, then that's what we're here for, here at Wall Street Mastermind. So if you guys are interested in kind of like exploring essentially getting our help, it is by application only, because we don't have the bandwidth to, one, we don't have the bandwidth to work with everybody, but two, also like we can't just offer money back guarantees to anyone who wants it, right? Because like there are a lot of people out there that if we were to offer them money back guarantee, like we would just go out of business, right? And so like at the end of the day, we'll only do that for people that we feel very good about and we feel confident that we can get you the outcome. And so the incentives are fully aligned. Like we won't invite anyone to the program that we don't feel confident we can get a result for, right? Which is actually what you should want, right? And so if you're interested in applying, the first step would be for you to speak to someone who's already gone through our program. Speak to one of the alumni from our program. It's usually just an upperclassman who's already recruited successfully. I've already got an offer from banking, and you can do that by just booking a free virtual coffee chat with them and asking them whatever questions you want, recruiting advice, their experience in the program, just whatever you think would be helpful for you. And once you've done that, if you still really want to apply, if you're still interested, then they can set you up for a call with our team, and then we can see if it's a good fit. So if that's something that you guys are interested in, specifically the free virtual coffee chat, then you can actually go and just book one by going to www.wallstreetmastermind.com/apply. The street's abbreviated to ST, so it's wallstmastermind.com/apply. And we look forward to just meeting you and learning more about you and seeing if we can actually help you. So with that said, Amanda, I want to thank you so much for taking your time every day to talk to us. Again, during a super busy time for you, and I want to just congratulate you again on really an amazing offer, especially still in the process. And I'm super happy for you. And I started my career at Deutsche Bank, so that place has a special place in my heart, to be honest. But it's a great firm, and and I think they have a great sales and trading practice, and so I think you're gonna have a great experience there, and can't wait to see all you accomplish.
Thank you for having me. This is really fun.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was great having you on, and thanks again for taking the time. And definitely let's stay in touch and don't be a stranger. If there's anything else we can ever help you with, like you know how to reach us. So
Yeah,
cool. Guys, so we're gonna wrap it up here, and thank you guys for tuning in. We'll be back with more of these for you guys in the near future. And until next time, all right?